Hello and welcome to Indus News Live from Islamabad. I'm Meher Sher and these are the headlines. The Pakistan Army says Islamabad has exposed India's state sponsorship of terrorism in its dossier containing undeniable evidence. In an interview, Pakistan Army spokesperson Major General Babar Iftikhar said India's position has weakened globally since the revocation of the special status of occupied Kashmir. He said India is trying to tag the indigenous freedom struggle in occupied Kashmir as terrorism. Iran's Guardian Council has approved a law obliging the government to halt UN inspections of nuclear sites. The council was the last hurdle in the legal process before the law came into effect. The law also approves stepping up uranium enrichment beyond the limits set under the 2015 nuclear deal. Bangladesh has begun transferring several hundred Rohingya refugees to what the UN worries is a low-lying island prone to cyclones and floods. Almost 1 million Rohingya, most of whom fled a military offensive in neighboring Myanmar in 2017, live in squalid camps in southeast Bangladesh. Azerbaijan says nearly 2,800 of its soldiers were killed in weeks of fighting with the Armenian forces over the Nagorno-Karabakh region. The country has now fully reclaimed lands around the region under the Russia-brokered truce. Meanwhile, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who is a strong ally of Azerbaijan, is due to visit the country next week. The number of coronavirus infections in Iran has surpassed 1 million. In Pakistan, the caseload has exceeded 406,000 after nearly 3,500 people tested positive for coronavirus. Earlier, the United States recorded over 2,300 fatalities, the second highest daily death count since the pandemic began. Globally, there have been more than 64 million infections and nearly 1.5 million deaths. And in football, Paris Saint-Germain has defeated Manchester United 3-1 in the Group H clash in the UEFA Champions League at Old Trafford. Brazilian Neymar scored twice to drive his side against the 10-men United after midfielder Federico Rodriguez was sent off. Well, those were the headlines. More news in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. And now for the news in more detail. Pakistan Army says Islamabad has exposed Indian state sponsorship of terrorism in its dossier containing undeniable evidence. In an interview, Pakistan Army spokesperson Major General Babar Iftikhar said the international community has taken up the issue seriously. He said India's position has weakened globally since the revocation of occupied Kashmir's special status last year. He said India is trying to tag the indigenous freedom struggle in occupied Kashmir as terrorism. The spokesperson said New Delhi is trying to divert the world's attention from atrocities in Kashmir by repeatedly violating ceasefire at the LOC. Responding to a question regarding the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, Major General Iftikhar said India has been trying to stop the timely completion of the project. He said the CPEC is not only a game changer for Pakistan, but it will benefit the whole region. Now, the UN has adopted a resolution presented by Pakistan and the Philippines on religious harmony and peace. The resolution has been approved with a majority of 90 votes in the General Assembly, while no country voted against it. Introducing the draft, the permanent representative of Pakistan, Ambassador Munir Akram, said Prime Minister Imran Khan has repeatedly called on the UN and international community to counter Islamophobia and promote peace. Akram said deliberate vilification and negative stereotyping of Muslims only perpetuates clash of civilizations. Referencing France's offensive caricatures, he said condoning provocative actions only encourages cultural disharmony. Akram said the resolution also acknowledges the call of the High Representative of the UN Alliance of Civilization, which discredited religious mockery. And Pakistan has welcomed the agreement reached on rules and procedures by the Afghan parties in Doha. At a Foreign Office briefing, spokesperson Zahid Hafiz Chaudhry termed the development another significant step forward. Chaudhry said the agreement reflects a common resolve of the parties to secure a negotiated settlement. The Foreign Office spokesperson said Pakistan will continue to support the intra-Afghan negotiations. He said Islamabad hopes the dialogue will lead to an inclusive, broad-based and comprehensive political solution. Chaudhry said such a political settlement will pave the way for a peaceful, stable and prosperous Afghanistan. Now, the U.S. military says it will keep 2 larger bases in Afghanistan despite reducing troops to 2,500 by January 15th. Speaking at a think tank, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, said the U.S. military will continue aiding Afghan security forces and carrying out operations against ISIS and al-Qaeda. Milley says the U.S. will also keep several satellite bases. The top U.S. general said Washington had achieved a modicum of success in Afghanistan. He termed negotiated political settlements with power sharing as the most effective way to end the conflict. This comes after the Kabul administration and the Taliban reached a preliminary deal to press on with the peace talks. And in India, demonstrations have erupted across Himachal Pradesh to support the farmers in their protest against New Delhi's new agricultural reforms. Protesters say Prime Minister Narendra Modi's BJP government is bent on crushing the farmers. Over in New Delhi, thousands of farmers have been staging sit-ins, blocking major roads into the capital since last week. The new laws can pave the way for the government to stop buying grain at guaranteed prices. Farmers fear the reforms will leave them at the mercy of big corporates. An Iranian watchdog has approved a law obliging the government to halt UN inspections of nuclear sites. The Guardian Council also urged Tehran to step up uranium enrichment beyond the limits set under the 2015 deal. Under the new law, Tehran will give 2 months to European parties to ease sanctions on Iran's oil and financial sectors. The powerful 12-member council approved the Strategic Act to revoke sanctions despite government opposition. President Hassan Rouhani has termed the parliament's move harmful to diplomatic efforts aimed at easing U.S. sanctions. But the stance of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who has the last word on all matters of state, is not known. And for more on this, we are being joined by Habib Abdul Hussein, an analyst from Tehran. Thank you so much for your time. Sir, Iran's Guardian Council has given the final approval to a bill aimed at further reducing Tehran's nuclear commitments. Can this bill be considered Iran's response to the assassination of its top nuclear scientist, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh?
Well, Iran has already said that it will respond to the assassination and it will take practical steps. This can be one part of the practical step, but the response is already there. I mean, Iranians have tried to be strategically patient over the past years after signing the nuclear deal with the P5+1 group of countries. But the retaliation and response is something else. Iran reserves the right, it said, of course, to retaliate. And this is not the first time. Fakhrizadeh was the 5th Iranian scientist to be assassinated, and apparently, according to many reports, by Israel. So the issue of retaliation is different. But yes, this comes in the fallout over the assassination of Fakhrizadeh, and it is seen as sort of practical solutions and practical approach by the Iranian parliament, which already criticizes the government for not taking actually firm and decisive action over the JCPOA, and the other sides, I mean the European and the US, a lack of commitment, what they call.
Now, President-elect Joe Biden said he is still committed to his promise of returning to the nuclear deal. Can this bill damage global diplomatic efforts in restoring the 2015 nuclear deal?
Well, I think this will also serve as a pressure leverage against President-elect Biden, because it's just a matter of who is going to take the first step. Biden says that if Iranians are in full compliance with the deal, then they will start remove the sanctions. But this is not how Iranians view the situation. They want the US to take the first step, and that is revoking the sanctions and removing the punishment against Iran. So this will be a sort of complicated for both sides, especially for Americans and President Biden, given the fact that Donald Trump has already scorched the airs for diplomacy, and he is expected to continue this path over the weeks to come, in his final days in office. So Iranians are more demanding and expect Joe Biden to take the first step, and they're not supposed to do actually the same thing unless the US stops and revokes the sanctions.
Habib Abdul Hussein, thank you for talking to Indus News. And now moving on, Bangladesh has begun transferring several hundred Rohingya refugees to what the UN worries is a low-lying island prone to cyclones and floods. The first batch of refugees was taken to Basan Char, a flood-prone bay of Bengal Island that emerged from the sea 20 years ago. Authorities have reportedly planned to move around 2,500 people to the low-lying island in a first phase. This has sparked concerns among rights groups fearing for the safety of refugees. Almost 1 million Rohingya, most of whom fled a military offensive in neighboring Myanmar in 2017, live in squalid camps in southeast Bangladesh. And Azerbaijan says nearly 2,800 of its soldiers were killed in weeks of fighting with the Armenian forces over the Nagorno-Karabakh region. The country has now fully reclaimed lands around the region under the Russia-brokered truce. Armenia has not yet disclosed a final death toll for its military, but a health ministry official confirmed last month that over 2,300 soldiers were killed. Meanwhile, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who is a strong ally of Azerbaijan, is due to visit the country next week. We'll be back with more news after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. The UN says Libya faces a serious crisis due to the presence of foreign mercenaries and military bases. Special Envoy to the UN Chief Stephanie Williams was speaking at the second round of the Libyan political dialogue. Williams mentioned there were 10 military bases and 20,000 foreign troops in the country. She said massive foreign weapons consignments coming into Libya undermine the peace process. She said foreign forces were only in Libya to serve their interests. Williams added these were blatant violations of the UN arms embargo. The UN envoy said the best way forward is through a broad and inclusive political dialogue. And acting on President Emmanuel Macron's Islamophobic policies, France has decided to launch an inspection and monitoring campaign over 80 mosques, threatening to shut them down. Paris claims the unprecedented measures are an attempt to curb extremism. Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin said the government has decided to take massive and strong action against religious separatism. He said they will be inspecting 76 mosques very closely to determine their relation and links to extremism. Darmanin added that decision to close some mosques may come as the result of inspection. Now, the U.S. President Donald Trump has once again renewed his unsubstantiated electoral fraud allegations. Trump's video messages on social media come a day after Attorney General William Barr ruled out massive electoral fraud. This report has more.
Despite suffering major setbacks on legal fronts, with courts dismissing lawsuits on electoral fraud, the U.S. president persists his defiance and refuses to concede defeat in the presidential election. In video message, President Trump reaffirmed his resolve to keep up his fight against the outcome. The president claimed there is overwhelming evidence, but many in media and the judiciary disagree with him. Trump said he had tens of thousands of ballots needed to overturn the results in battleground states.
We already have the proof, we already have the evidence, and it's very clear. Many people in the media and even judges so far have refused to accept it. They know it's true, they know it's there, they know who won the election, but they refuse to say, you're right. Our country needs somebody to say you're right.
President Trump has so far refused to concede defeat, and his legal team continues to file legal challenges to the outcome. Meanwhile, his personal attorney Rudy Giuliani has presented several witnesses before Michigan House Oversight Committee. Giuliani's key witness, Melissa Carone, said she saw at least 30,000 ballots counted multiple times.
This election, I will say, these Democrats took every avenue possible to commit fraud in this election, and what I saw on the 3rd and 4th was over 20 counts of fraud being taking place in front of my face. And this isn't counting, you know, the ballots that are found in rivers, the ballots found under rock.
Giuliani blasted Barr for failing to thoroughly investigate the evidence he uncovered of widespread voter fraud.
The United States has recorded over 2,300 coronavirus fatalities, the second highest daily death count since the pandemic began. With nearly 14 million infections, the United States is the worst hit country, followed by India and Brazil. Iran is also witnessing a spike in infections as the overall count surpasses 1 million. Globally, the virus has claimed nearly 1.5 million lives and infected 64.5 million people. More about coronavirus in this following report.
The world now appears to be just days away from the first rollout of a coronavirus vaccine. But U.S. officials warn the pandemic will pose the country's grimmest health crisis yet over the next few months before vaccines become widely available. Most Americans might not have access to a vaccine till June 2021. Hospitalizations from the virus topped 100,000, more than double the number at the beginning of November.
By the end of December, the administration suggests that there'll be enough to vaccinate 20 million people with 2 dosages, which is 40 million dosages. That means 6% of Americans. Gives you an idea of where we're going to be coming into January. And those 6% will be prioritized as the healthcare workers, seniors in congregate facilities, etc.
Europe, meanwhile, has been forced to dampen its Christmas celebrations amid the ongoing surge. Italy has banned the midnight Christmas mass and all movement between regions amid high COVID toll. Spain has capped year-end parties at 10 people, restricting all domestic travel as the country's healthcare systems near a collapse. Germany, too, has decided to extend its COVID-19 restrictions until January.
If the infection incidence continues to develop the way we have been seeing in the last days, then we will meet again on January 4. The federal states will extend their measures from December 20 until January 10. This means that basically we continue as we are now, with the exception of the special Christmas measures until January 10.
Despite being a rare success story, Australia has ruled out an early opening of international borders. The country aims to complete a review of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine by January 2021, despite UK approval. While Russian President Vladimir Putin has ordered a large-scale voluntary vaccination program from next week, Moscow will have produced 2 million doses of its own vaccine within the next few days.
In Pakistan, 39 people have lost their lives to COVID-19 over the past 24 hours, raising the death toll to over 8,200. The health ministry says nearly 3,500 people tested positive for the disease overnight. The ministry said there are more than 51,000 active COVID-19 cases in the country. It said out of nearly 407,000 countrywide cases, close to 347,000 have recovered so far. The ministry said over 177,000 cases have been detected in the Sindh province, while Punjab has reported over 121,000 cases. In the capital Islamabad, over 31,000 have been infected so far. The Prince of Wales says Britain and Pakistan share close bilateral ties. He said this while speaking to Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan over the phone. Prince Charles reaffirmed UK's assistance to Pakistan during the coronavirus pandemic. The Prince expressed regret over the loss of lives in Pakistan due to the virus. The two dignitaries also stressed the need for global cooperation to combat climate change. And in the United Kingdom, multiple casualties have been reported after a large explosion at a wastewater treatment site in Bristol. Authorities are still determining the cause of the explosion. The plant has been closed temporarily. Roads leading to the area have also been blocked. And in Thailand, at least 5 people have been killed by flash floods caused by monsoon rains. Authorities say the flash floods hit 7 provinces in the southern part of the country. According to the Interior Ministry, floods have affected more than 255,000 households. The affected region is home to the country's rubber plantations that account for the world's major natural rubber supply. The BUREVI tropical cyclone is heading towards the southern region of India after causing slight damage to Sri Lanka's east coast. Colombo issued a red alert while forbidding fishermen not to venture out to sea and ordered school closure for 3 days. Sri Lanka's Disaster Management Center said no casualties and damage has been reported as the cyclone was minimal. Meanwhile, India Met Office has issued a red warning to parts of the southern states of Tamil Nadu and Kerala. It said the weather forecast predicted heavy rainfall and high-speed winds in the states. India's weather office said it expects damage to thatched huts and power and communication lines could also be affected. Peruvian police have confiscated nearly $6 million in counterfeit currency, which was due to be smuggled. During the operation, police arrested an alleged member of the criminal gang. According to local media, the individual was arrested for prior counterfeit offenses against financial and monetary order. Police said they raided a site in Lima where they found sheets of fake $20 bills. Peru is considered one of the main countries in the world where dollars are forged, surpassing Colombia. And this year is on track to be the second hottest on record, behind 2016 since records began in 1850. The World Meteorological Organization said 2020 is a year characterized by heat waves, droughts, wildfires, and raging hurricanes. More in this report.
As the end of 2020 year is fast approaching, scientists have revealed it to be the second hottest ever recorded in history. Stoked by extreme heat, wildfires flared across Australia, Siberia and the United States this year, sending smoke plumes around the globe. Less visible was a surge in marine heat to record levels, with more than 80% of the global ocean experiencing a marine heat wave. The World Meteorological Organization said greenhouse gas concentrations climbed to a new record in 2019 and have risen so far this year, despite a drop in emissions due to COVID-19 lockdowns. Hot years have typically been associated with El Nino, a natural event that releases heat from the Pacific Ocean. However, this year coincides with La Nina, which has the opposite effect and cools temperatures. The WMO will confirm the data in March 2021. A climate pact agreed in Paris 5 years ago compels countries to make efforts to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Above this, scientists warn of catastrophic climate change.
The change in the Arctic is not only for the region, but also for the whole global climate system. The jet stream, for instance, is one of the regulator of the weather patterns of the Northern Hemisphere. So anything changing in the Arctic affect also the weather extremes in terms of heat waves, in terms of also sometimes cold waves that affect part of the world.
Scientists have warned that heat-related deaths are surging around the world, particularly among older people. The WMO says it will take a while for the reduction in the emissions to take effect.
Moving on, a middle-aged Maya beekeeper has won the 2020 Goldman Prize for her work to protect the environment. Details in this report.
Lady Peck Martin has waged a legal battle against pesticides and genetically modified organisms in Mexico for more than 10 years. Also called Guardian of the Bees, she works for the care and preservation of Melipona bees. This year, she won the Goldman Prize, dubbed the Green Nobel Prize, in part for her ongoing struggle against U.S. agrochemical giant Monsanto.
They began to open up agricultural areas to be able to plant transgenic soybeans. Today, they are still deforesting. The area for soybeans continues to grow. We were also concerned about the whole issue of beekeeping.
In 2000, Monsanto began growing experimental plots of genetically modified soybeans in Mexico. And in 2012, without consulting local Maya communities, the Mexican government granted the agrochemical company permits to plant GMOs in 7 states.
The projects will generate income, but not for the communities, not for the indigenous people. We are cheap labor for those projects. When you realize and become aware and look at what is happening, you say this shouldn't happen.
Peck led a legal campaign against the Mexican government. The Supreme Court ruled the government violated the Mayans' constitutional rights and suspended the planting of transgenic soy.
More news after a short break. Stay with us. And now on to the world of business. OPEC countries and Russia have resumed talks in a bid to define oil policies for 2021. An independent research consultancy, Energy Aspects, noted tentative progress in discussions between OPEC Plus members. It said ministers are inching closer to a compromise that should break the impasse. Energy Aspects said it understood options, including rolling over existing cuts into January. It disclosed a proposal to increase production by 1 million barrels per day in February through March and by another 1 million in April. An initial round of discussions failed to bring a compromise on how to tackle weak oil demand amid a second coronavirus wave. And moving on, Boeing 737 MAX has carried out its first flight with media on board after being grounded for over 20 months. American Airlines 737 MAX flight sought to demonstrate the safety standards of redesigned jet. The 45-minute flight was a mere hop from Texas to Oklahoma. Media representatives were given a tour of American Airlines 737 MAX fleet's technical operations hangar in Oklahoma. Last month, the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration cleared Boeing 737 MAX following design changes and new training. The demo flight comes weeks before the first commercial passenger flight on December 29th.
Well, I mean, the confidence starts here, right here in the flight deck. I mean, the pilots have to feel confident, and I feel very sure that they will. And that confidence will translate back to the passengers that are flying. I mean, this airplane has gone through more scrutiny than any aircraft that I know of, and rightly so. And it's brought it to a point of which it's extremely safe.
And Wall Street stocks have opened largely flat as hopes of a swift COVID-19 vaccine and economic stimulus countered worries about rising cases. The Labor Department data shows that new applications for unemployment benefits fell last week after a recent jump. The U.S. economy is likely to add 440,000 jobs, while the unemployment rate is estimated to decrease to nearly 7%. The indices of Dow Jones Industrial Average and NASDAQ Composite traded 0.25% higher. The S&P 500 index traded marginally higher. Meanwhile, oil prices remain unchanged as deadlock persists on production cuts. And on to the world of sports and football. Paris Saint-Germain has defeated Manchester United 3-1 in the Group H clash in the UEFA Champions League at Old Trafford. More in this report.
Brazilian Neymar scored twice to drive his side against the 10-men United after midfielder Federico Rodriguez was sent off. In a Group E fixture, Chelsea thrashed Sevilla 4-0 to strengthen its position atop the group. French Olivier Giroud scored all 4 goals for the Blues In a Group G competition, Juventus outplayed Dynamo Kiev 3-0 with Cristiano Ronaldo scoring his 750th career goal. In another Group G match, Barcelona secured a comfortable win over Ferencváros 3-0 to remain on top of the group with 15 points.
And Britain has allowed fans into many football stadiums for the first time since March. The decision was taken as the government eased the COVID-19 restrictions. Supporters returned to the clubs to witness the Championship, League One and League Two matches, respectively. If clubs are in Tier 1, they can welcome 4,000 fans back. Tier 2 allows 2,000 fans to return, but no enthusiasts are allowed back in Tier 3. Manchester United were unable to have fans at their Champions League clash with PSG as they are in Tier 3. Premier League side Arsenal have also allowed 2,000 fans into their Emirates Stadium for their match against Rapid Vienna in the Europa League. Meanwhile, France's Stéphanie Frappart has become the first female to take charge of a men's Champions League match. The 36-year-old took charge of Juventus Group G match against Dynamo Kiev in Turin. Stéphanie Frappart has made history by becoming the first ever female to officiate UEFA. Frappart was also the first female referee to officiate a major men's European final in September 2019. She also holds the record of being the first female to take charge of a French League One match in April 2019. Switzerland's Nicole Pétignat was the first female referee to officiate in UEFA matches when she was put in charge of 3 UEFA Cup qualifying round games between 2004 and 2009. And 2 more members of the Pakistan cricket team touring New Zealand have tested positive for COVID-19. The total number of affected players has now reached 10. New Zealand's health ministry says the team is not allowed to train. It will remain on hold pending consideration by health officials. The Pakistan Cricket Board says all those who return negative tests are expected to be able to train in managed isolation. The first T20 is slated for the 18th of December at Auckland, while the last test will be played at Christchurch on the 3rd of January. And Pablo Matera has been reinstated as Argentina captain, and his suspension for discriminatory and xenophobic comments on social media lifted. Matera and his teammates Guido Petti and Santiago Sossini were suspended on Tuesday for posts made between 2011 and 2013. But the Argentine Rugby Union now says such measures were unnecessary. It said the players' apologies and good behavior in the years since meant their suspensions could be lifted. The union said the disciplinary process continues and the commission will arrive at a final resolution in the next few days. Argentina head coach said the trio have not been named in the Puma squad for Saturday's test against Australia. And now it's time to take a look at the latest weather updates from around the world. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.